In this lecture, we're going to write a couple more tests to practice using the wrapper API and matcher functions. We have a component called SongItem. Open it in your editor. This component relies on the parent component to pass down data. In the script block, the data that powers the component is coming from a prop called song. We're going to write a test that will check if the component is correctly rendering based on the song data. We'll need a way to pass down data from the test. Typically, it'll come from an external source. However, it's usually recommended to use mock data. We're not interested in testing the request for the data. We want to focus solely on testing if the component can render the correct output. In the tests directory, create a file called songitem.spec.js. We'll need to import the songitem component. The path to the component is @/components/songitem.view. Next, we'll import the shallow mount function from the Vue Test Utilities module. We'll be mounting the component. The shallow mount function will help us with mounting it. The first thing we'll do is call the describe function to group the test suite. We'll use the name of the component as the identifier. Inside the function, we'll call the test function. We're going to create a similar test to what we had before. We'll check if the component is rendering the correct inner content. Here's the catch. If we look inside the SongItem component, we'll find that it isn't rendering static content. Everything is completely dynamic. It's still testable. We will need to take extra steps. The test we'll create will check if the component is rendering the name of the author. The author name is being rendered in a span tag with the classes TextGray500 and TextSM. Inside the element, we're using the expression song.displayName. Back in the test, the name of the test will be the following: renders song.displayName. We'll pass in an arrow function for the second argument. The very first thing we'll do is mount the component. We'll create a variable called wrapper. Its value will be the object returned by the shallow mount function. The shallow mount function requires the component to mount. We'll pass in the SongItem component. We need to pass the song data to the component. Otherwise, we won't be able to test it properly. The shallow mount and mount functions have a second argument we can use. Pass in an options object for the component. This argument will allow us to pass down data to the component. We'll define a variable for containing the data to pass down to the component. Above the function, create a variable called song. Set it to an object. The test we're creating will check if the displayName property is rendering in the component. We'll define a property called displayName. Its value will be test. There are additional properties that the song object should have, but we're limiting our test to the displayName property. We don't need to define the other properties at this time. Next, inside the object of the second argument, we'll add an object called propsData. The propsData option is where we can add in props for the component. The props object is where we can add in props for the component. The shallow mount function will take care of passing in the data as a prop. Inside the object, we'll add the song object. Great! We can write the test to check if the component is rendering the name of the author. We'll call the expect function. We'll pass in the value returned by the wrapper.text function. Lastly, we'll chain the toContain function with the song.displayName property. The test will essentially check if the displayName property is present in the component. Let's try giving things a test. We've received an error. The error is stating that we're using a component called router link that is undefined. The reason we're receiving this error is because the router link component isn't registered. Remember, we're testing the component in isolation. We don't have access to the components registered by the viewRouter component. Therefore, the router link component isn't defined. We'll resolve this issue in the next lecture.